Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I drop my kid off at swim practice and deliver an episode to you while I wait for her to finish. I'm Brendan Riley. Oh, good morning, listeners. It is a rainy, misty June the 11th, so I imagine traffic noise, if you hear it, will be louder than usual, but with those wet tires. As you can tell from the intro, I've got a new schedule this morning and probably for the next couple of weeks. My daughter's got an early morning swim practice, so I'm going to be, when I drop her off, then I park the car and I take a walk for long enough to chat with you, and then I'm going to go to a local Starbucks and mess around on my laptop a little bit. It'll be quite a fun time, I think, wandering through a lovely suburban neighborhood, hopefully not waking people up, but I'm not speaking too loudly, so all should be well. I thought I would do today's episode sort of continuing or completing the run of episodes about Kickstarter, at least for now. I certainly have more to say about it, particularly about the models for what a campaign should be or what I like or dislike about the way campaigns work. But I think that maybe is better left for another time. So I wanted to finish today's episode with sort of wrap up the series that I was calling What's Kickstarter For? And I'm going to call this one Kickstarter is for a lot of different stuff. So in the previous two episodes I did Kickstarter was for dreamers and Kickstarter is for, I said Kickstarter is for dreamers and Kickstarter is for pre-orders. But, hopefully I revealed in talking about those that neither of those is strictly true, but they're both potentially or partially true. So today I want to talk about the mix of ideas of other things that people think Kickstarter is for, or that people experience Kickstarter as being for. So I have three sort of positives and three negatives, and I think I'll alternate back and forth between the two. Might as well start with negatives so we can get to the good stuff. I'd say the first negative, or the thing that comes up as people in the industry talk about Kickstarter, is that Kickstarter cuts out game stores. There are a lot of game stores, game distributors too, but game stores in particular who dislike Kickstarter because obviously it cuts them out of the distribution chain. When you are making a Kickstarter, you might hope to get it into distribution, but for many Kickstarter creators, getting a game into the stores is a hope, but not necessarily the definition of success. You know, selling enough of the games to be able to make another run of games is a big part of it, and getting the game into distribution is sort of a far-off hope. I think the models the people in the industry talk about still aim at making that level work, but in general, that's not necessarily the aim of a lot of developers. There are some people who have just completely foregone the notion of developing a game toward distribution and are just selling it themselves. A well-known example of this is Tim Fowers, the guy who made Burgle Bros and Paperback. His games are only available on his website. He doesn't sell them via game stores. I mean, I have seen game stores where you could buy them, but I don't think he gives a significant discount to game stores. And so for a game store, it's not a great choice to buy those games. And so the game stores don't necessarily like Kickstarter very much. So it's not for game stores. On the other hand, it is for value. One of the things that we've discovered, I think, with the rise of Kickstarter is the level of value which can be given to the consumer when we don't have to worry about a game store and a game distributor taking their cut. Right, as I've talked about before, the old model was 20%. Your game shouldn't cost more than 20% of MSRP because you need to leave room for the game store and the game distributor to take their cut. Well, if you're not having a game store and a game distributor take their cut, then you don't need to leave the room for that. Maybe you sell a game for 30%. instead of 20. That's not necessarily ideal because it hurts your ability to recoup other pieces of the chain, but at the same time it allows you to provide a game with greater value to the players or the consumers. And I think one of the results of this part of it is that in general game companies seem to be paying more attention to the quality of their components than they used to. That just might also be the higher level of competition overall. It's hard for me to understand or make a claim about that one way or another. But in general, it seems like the quality of components has gone up. So that's been one of the upsides of Kickstarter. Another of the downsides of Kickstarter would be what I'd call the loss of the quality filter. So one of the truisms of publishing before the internet age was that you had to spend a lot of money in order to publish something. And so you had to make sure it was good because you had to be confident people would buy it. That's not to say that was always true, but in general, the filter leaned towards something being good because if people don't buy it, you can't recoup your money. Well, in the internet age, when it costs virtually nothing to publish something in print, I'm putting quotes around that, or when you can use Kickstarter to get the consumer's money first and then publish the thing, your need for quality shifts away from quality of product toward quality of marketing. And this isn't entirely true. Obviously, if people get a product and they decide it's crap, they're less likely to buy the next one from you. And if you develop a reputation of being a company that produces really nice looking crap, nobody's going to buy your stuff. But then again, there are companies that have a reputation of producing really nice looking crap and it keeps selling. So it's a little hard to say that it doesn't work at all. But my point is that it used to be in the era of print that review and quality, filter for quality happened beforehand. And in the era of the digital, which even though these are physical board games, the effect of how they're being produced is affected by the nature of digital commerce and digital transactions. The internet has shaped how they're being produced, even if they're not actually being produced on the internet. And so the burden for filtering for quality has been shifted from the producer or the reviewer to the audience. That it's the consumer themselves who has to decide whether or not a thing is good. This is, of course, true in all media. Music, you can get the album produced by the band up the street and it might be amazing. Or you can get the album produced by the band up the street from another town over, or another state over, or another country over. And they're all on equal footing in terms of the internet's ability to give it to you. But that just means there's a lot more you have to filter before you can find the good stuff. It's a lot easier for someone to put out crap. And while board games still have the limit of needing the money, Kickstarter produces the internet effect for a physical product. So I would say the second bad thing that Kickstarter does is it helps remove the quality filter from the game publishing process. On the other hand, the positive side of that same coin is that Kickstarter is for niche audiences. One of the things that prevents any independent or small project from getting off the ground is the skepticism from the publisher about whether or not that project will succeed. If the publisher doesn't think there's enough audience for that thing, then they can't publish it in good conscience because they don't know that it'll sell right. But if you have a guaranteed audience for a thing, then you can take a risk on it, even if it's not widely known, or even if you don't think it'll sell widely. An example of that would be the CMON game Hate, which I mentioned a couple times, but was interesting in that they recognized it as a game that would not sell at stores, that it is too dark and its content is objectionable in a way that if you don't know what you're buying, they don't want to risk selling it to you. So it begs the question of how could you possibly publish something that functions that way? Well, what better way than Kickstarter, where everybody who's buying it knows the thing they're buying before they buy it. And then CMON quite actively said throughout the process that they're only making the game for Kickstarter. Once the game is out, they're not selling it in the store. And so it's really interesting. They get to make this game that otherwise they wouldn't make for risk of financial problems. And instead they get to produce it because they have the guaranteed audience to begin with. So a niche audience is more capable of supporting a thing than you might otherwise know. And this is true for all sorts of Kickstarter projects, right? This is what Kickstarter is built for, right? The challenge of an independent or small or niche project is that you don't know whether or not you're going to have the audience. So again, if you find the audience first, you're able to make the thing. And so while on the one hand, the filter for quality that we used to count on as an essential part of how we make sure that crap doesn't get produced too much, it also becomes the engine by which we can produce really weird little niche projects that otherwise might not get made. And I think that's pretty cool. So the third downside to Kickstarter kind of goes to the Kickstarter is for Dreamers episode that I did first, which is that Kickstarter is vaporware. Kickstarter is a website for selling people on something that has not been made yet. And that's a risky proposition that you still get the sense that a lot of people don't understand, right? When there is an argument between Kickstarter is for Dreamers and Kickstarter is for pre-orders people, the pre-orders people get scolded for forgetting that the things being sold on Kickstarter don't exist. And there's no guarantee that they will. So when somebody puts a game up for sale on Kickstarter, or a game for kickstarting, what they're really doing is saying, hey, I'd like to make this game. What do you say? And it's possible that they won't actually be able to make it. They'll do their best, and then at the end of the day, they won't have made that game. And that is a scary proposition compared to the potential for not getting your game. There are numerous stories of games that didn't get made for one reason or another. Either they got embroiled in legal issues, or the people just failed to make them. Maybe they underestimated the cost of something or other. That's certainly what happened with the game that I backed ever so long ago, Teramyyd Earthsphere, which I've mentioned several times, and is apparently in eventually I'll get it, I hope. We'll see. But the possibility that you won't get your game is something unique to Kickstarter when compared to, say, a brick and mortar store. If you go to a game store and there's a sign for a game and it's like $40 for this game, but the game isn't there, you're like, meh, I'm pretty sure we'll get it in. Why don't you pay for it now? That's a weird proposition, especially if they say, and if it doesn't come in, you don't get a refund. That's a weird proposition and a strange place to be. Now, technically, Kickstarter does require that people supply the rewards that they say they're going to, blah, blah, blah. But the long and short of it is, they might not. And you're taking a risk when you back a Kickstarter project that you won't actually get the thing that you're backing. So, that is perhaps the biggest downside of Kickstarter, is that the games don't exist yet. And you're taking a risk that never existed before in the history of board gaming, that you would pay for a product that you don't actually get. As opposed to paying for a product that you hope is going to be good and it turns out it's bad. You might actually just not even get it at all. So that's the third bad thing. So the third upside, and I would say this is connected to niche audiences and connected to quality components. And I would say this is the speed of innovation. We have seen in the last decade a bounty of board game innovation unheard of in the industry. And I guess that's whatever. It's probably, I think it's reasonable to assign some of that bounty to the growth of the hobby that comes from the internet. Part of it is the ability to find other people who play the games and learn about games and dive into games And part of it is the allure of Kickstarter, the idea of being a game designer and getting to make your own game and publishing it. And as we get more people experimenting with the medium, we're going to get more weird stuff happening, right? The collective mental energy being put toward the idea, the problem of making a board game means that we're going to have more and more interesting and innovative stuff as people find different ways to engage with the hobby and explore it. So I would say, I think Kickstarter is for innovation. It's the place where people can experiment with weird and wild stuff in ways that they wouldn't have before or couldn't have before. And those other two aspects of the good side, in terms of being able to take risks or find niche audiences, those things emerge because of what I was saying about those two things emerge because of what I was saying about how you can get involved in the hobby. So that brings me to the end of my What is Kickstarter For episodes. We've got a few more things to talk about. So I'm curious, before I dive too much into what do you like or dislike from a campaign, I'm curious, what do you think Kickstarter is for? Have I hit all of the notes you would have talked about? Are there things that you thought Kickstarter was for that I didn't cover? The best place to share these is over on Boardgamegeek, where we have a guild 3269. I hope to hear from you and learn what are your experiences with Kickstarter. Where have these points resonated for you, and what points have I missed? You can also reach out to me individually, Brendan at rattleboxgames.com. You can tweet at me at rattleboxgames, or hop over to our website, rattleboxgames.com, where you can find show notes for this episode. Although I've turned off comments because I'm basically spending 10 minutes every day deleting spam comments. So I've turned off comments on all of our posts, and I'm now directing people to the Board Game Geek Guild. So sorry about that if you aren't on Board Game Geek. Well, that's it. I hope that your day is a little less misty and rainy than mine was. This is a relatively pleasant chat because I got to talk to you, but unpleasant weather-wise. So take care. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.